The first point I just wanted to say is that there's nothing new under the sun, because I was listening to Philip Adams' program last night, and he was replaying the forum from the Eveleigh workshops from last year, the 100th anniversary of the 1917 general strike in New South Wales. And guess what the topic was, what the issue was? It was about control of work. It was about technology, the introduction of the Taylor system into the New South Wales railway workshops in August 1917. And now we're talking 100 years later, we've moved on to a higher technology.
Sure.
Okay. I just wanted to raise a question on the other side of the question, is how is the labour movement and the workers' movement going to respond to this use of technology against the working class? And I feel that, and this is maybe raising a whole other issue, a whole other question which needs a lot more discussion. How is the trade union movement going to respond using technology to rebuild the strength of the workers' movement? Because...
Okay, that's fine.
No, I just want to say a couple of other things, all right? I just think that unless the workers' movement can use technology to counter the gig economy and this technology, and I just wanted to throw in something that I've been thinking about for a while. I'm retired now. I was a union delegate for many years, and my experience is that, contrary to the general impression in the media, people are not anti-union. Most of the workers out there are pro-union.
They just questions, not statements.
Yeah, okay, they just need the facilitation of how to relate to the union movement, how to join the union movement, how to keep going. So my question of technology is, I suggest that the ACTU needs to have a join union app, and you can just, and then there's a mechanism for deciding how that's referred to particular unions and so on, because most young workers don't know. I think we need to look at a massive technological change within the trade union movement to relate to young people, and that's the future of the union movement. We have got to join them, we've got to get them to use their apps to join the union movement, and I think it's a big question which needs to be pursued. Thanks.
And we need a genuine Labor Party.
Okay, so to answer the question very briefly, the change is starting. The ACTU have spearheaded a single join form that would one place to click where you can join all the different unions at once. There are two initiatives underway through United Voice. One is called Hospo Voice, which is a network of hospitality workers that is free to join, that enables workers to communicate about their issues at work, enables them to rate employers and places that are good to work, places that are bad to work. Via that app, we're having a campaign called Respect the Rule, which is all about sexual harassment in hospitality workplaces. We are also pioneering work in our casinos using AI technology, IBM's Watson technology, to assist organisers to organise in those spaces. These are exciting developments, but we have to be very careful about the idea that somehow we can just sort of insert unionism into an app and that's the end of it. Unionism is always about relationships. There is immense power we can have from working digitally, particularly in relation to bringing together workers in disaggregated workplaces. This was always a major obstacle for workers in domestic service, that they never saw each other. And the ways in which workers are separated from each other in the modern economy is multifarious, but particularly occurs through supply chain employment. And we actually have with technology the ability to transcend space, to bring these workers together, and we need to use it. So it's baby steps for the moment, but I think our ambitions and plans are really big.
There's just a couple of messages I was given beforehand. One of them is the Stop Adani, a Mighty Force. It's a meeting on Friday, July 27th at 6 p.m. That's at Mountain Street, Ultimo. Another one is Manus, evacuate Manus and Nauru, and There's a rally on that on Saturday, the 21st of July at the Sydney Town Hall. And finally, fixed, this is, I guess, Spencer, fixed New South Wales Transport, okay? That's at Saturday, August 11th, at Town Hall, again, between 5:30 and 7:30 p.m. Next question.
Yeah, thank you for a very informative discussion. My name's Kieran Howard, the Management Committee, PIP. I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate tonight. I'll ask a question which was posed by Guy Standing, the economist. Why don't trade unions support a universal basic income precisely when they should? And he argues that, I'll quote from him, when I recently attended a big summer school, and discussed it with a group of union leaders why they were opposed, they responded that they thought it was because if workers had a guaranteed basic income, they wouldn't join unions. That is a terrible line to take. Fortunately, it is also wrong. People who have basic security are more likely to join unions because people who have a degree of confidence are prepared to take the risk of joining a union in a situation where workers are increasingly casualised on fixed-term contracts and labour hire.
Okay, that's good.
Those
Good
who
question.
are acutely insecure dare not stand. And also, okay, one other question. Okay.
Well, I want to question.
You argue that workers are essential to the economy in terms of adding value. Isn't that premised on the notion that workers are essential to the capitalist economy as consumers and as the real effective demand that allows the capitalists to realise their surplus value at the point of sale? But doesn't that accept that there will always be a division between capital and labour, as opposed to the notion that capital, the tools, the means of production, the machinery, should be subordinated to the needs of labour, should be socialised and by the associated producers and automated as much as possible to reduce labour time and free the worker from the necessity of labour, along the lines of Paul Mason's book, Post-Capitalism, and his reference to Karl Marx's fragment on machines in his Grundrisse. So, just read your response to that.
Good question.
On the basic income question, I don't think there's any particular single view among trade unionists about basic income. I think there's a range of views, and it's a very complicated subject, of course. As you know, basic income comes in different sizes, shapes, and forms. In general, it is absolutely true that the stronger is the network of social security, and the greater is the possibility for human beings to decommodify themselves so that they can live without having to sell their labor, the stronger is the inherent bargaining power of workers in the workplace. No doubt about that. So in that regard, I support stronger social security, period. And it's no accident that social security, income security for working age people has been the #1 enemy under neoliberalism. They can tolerate a little bit here for the poor children and a little bit here for the poor seniors, but working people, they want to get as close to work or starve as possible. So now that could come in various forms. It could be incremental improvements to New Start that we can and should be fighting for, as well as big picture things like basic income. So in terms of me saying labor adds value to goods and services, I'm not thinking necessarily of sale, in a market type situation. I think even in a cooperative society where we worked to produce goods and services, we're still adding value through our labor. So I was thinking more kind of generically.
Okay, well, we'll go next one.
I won't have much. Just to say, look, I think Guy Standing's position on unions seemed to me a little caricatured. Like, I actually, like Jim, I don't think there's a homogenous position on universal basic income. I think there's a long history of unions supporting both stronger work and stronger welfare protections historically. I think there is, it is a complicated area. The idea of precarity that he advances tends to look at different forms of work insecurity, and he sort of says, well, unions are totally unfit for purpose to deal with the coalition of all those different forms of work insecurity. I don't think that's true, and in fact, a lot of workers who have multiple forms of insecurity are fighting for more secure work through their unions, and it's important that those workers not be left behind either. So I think the sort of polarisation of kind of for and anti-UBI as a kind of like cleavage line for politics is probably unhelpful.
Quite right.
Excellent. Next.
I wanted to talk about two things. Firstly, the fact that everything's being privatised means that a handful of corporations get to deliver all the services and thus have all the power if they win the government contract, and then they effectively have the work, particularly in the services sector with NDIS and other things like that. But it seems to me, and I wonder what can be done about that, and I think the rebuilding of the public sector is probably a way of going. And I'd ask you to comment on that. The second point I'd make is that things like Uber and indeed the delivery of services are basically a relationship between the Uber driver and the passenger. And all that is needed really is a technology that makes the link. And when I put this to a technology guy and said, well, why don't they just build a database where everybody can get to the Uber driver without any Uber in the middle going through this app, he said, oh, it's very difficult to get a better app than they've got. So it became a technology war, with the prize being such that capital could build a very good app, and non-capital or public good software developers, if you want to call them that, could not replace the Uber app, or indeed the app that says, I want somebody to do my shopping and help me out of bed 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week, and I don't want to have to go to the Salvation Army that takes half the money, or some other agency that takes half the money. So there should be the capacity with technology for some good agency, whatever you want to call it, to bridge the gap between the consumer and the provider. And that's so where the farmers are getting an ever smaller percentage of the value of the sale. The farm gate price and the retail price keeps getting further apart, when technology should allow it to become smaller. So could you comment on the good use, or the good intelligent use of public domain technology that could bridge the gap and stop this massive exploitation in a large number of social areas?
Parasites.
Yeah, social parasites. Yeah, corporate parasites. That was the word I used. Corporate parasites.
Yeah. I think, there is a moment where a lot of the neoliberal orthodoxies about privatisation have come to be questioned in a new kind of way in the last couple of years. And it seems to me there's an urgent kind of politics required about that demands thinking through where the market belongs and where it doesn't. And I think there's probably strong arguments for a sort of cessation of the privatisation machine and a pushing it back. But that won't happen without people demanding it. And at the moment, the Labor Party are not in a position of opening up that debate. So I just think we need to keep arguing for it and not accept the logic of marketisation is the only way of organising things, particularly things like disability services, which, as I mentioned before, I think are particularly hostile to the kind of efficiency logic that guides markets.
Excellent.
On the technology issue, you could totally just do it through a co-op.
Why does it never get done?
There's no need to have Uber as a private owner. Uber's creaming off 30% of all the fares. Think about taxis. You know what was a really exciting new technology once for taxi dispatch? Radios. Once upon a time, that was actually an exciting new technology.
Got hold of it.
And so the private companies set up themselves to do radio dispatch of taxis. And then lo and behold, workers figured out, you know what, it's not that expensive to buy a radio and hire some people to work at the radio, and we can do it ourselves. And cooperative taxi services became quite common because the actual, what's actually provided by the capitalist was pretty minor.
That's right.
And you know what, it's ultimately going to be the same in Uber. Right now, Uber is challenged left, right, and center by other private companies. This is one reason among many. Uber's never going to make $1 a profit. But another direction would be to try and socialize the thing. And this leads to a bigger issue about the power of private information companies who derive their power simply from being at the center of everything. That's what Google does. And it's immensely lucrative. It's a way of kind of privatizing the commons. We used to meet in physical places. Now we meet in digital places. But it's been privatized. So on some level, that could be one of our demands as well, is to take back that space. There's no reason why Google should make so much money out of just happening to be the biggest place to meet. And, I think that would be a very promising dimension for a modern left agenda, would be socializing the digital commons.
Excellent question. No more questions, that's all. Joffrey and...
Good evening, thank you for the presentations you made. And when I think of the future of work, I think of two things. One is the Mondragon Cooperative in Spain, and the second would be the worker takeover movement in Argentina. And I think it's quite relevant to Australia, especially when there are industries threatened by globalization and becoming uncompetitive. Don't you think, rather than closing down these industries, we should give first crack to the workers in these industries to take them over and turn them around?
Absolutely, and there's great experiences from all over the world. You mentioned two of them, but there's actually a surprising inventory of places in the world that have tried alternative ways of organizing production and alternative ways of organizing finance. Now taking over a broke factory is actually more complicated than it looks, because you have a whole system of working capital and investment and marketing and technology and everything that has to go into it. So it's not just a question of marching in and starting to run the machines, but a modern, sophisticated workers' movement could totally do that, and there's lots of examples of how it could be done.
Excellent. Next, final question.
Okay, I hope you have your pens ready. Based on your talk tonight, both speakers, a few questions. What happens when exploitation practices and the extent of the practices are exposed, and people, for example, who are ex-workers start opening up and talking about how they're exploited and how the extent of the gig economy, sort of, for example, taking away rights and the like? What influence does that have in terms of brand names? A lot of companies seem to be obsessed about their brand names. If a company or a brand actually gets damaged, it can actually be far more expensive than the cost of underpaying the workers. And regarding Francis, when you mentioned about introducing empathy rather than over-reliance on algorithms for assessing, for example, some people's performance or future performance, if we rely too much on algorithms, are we actually long-term, collectively, more vulnerable to problems when things go wrong, we're actually more vulnerable to systems collapsing or systems actually being revised very quickly, to the point where even the people who are actually running the show don't actually have the ability to either respond or adapt or actually survive in the form that we know, because that is actually a problem that's going to happen collectively from here on in globally, because the room for you to have isolation is actually reduced. And the last thing I want to ask is, if people start finding that systems actually abused online through the digital footprint, are we actually introducing a scenario where people start to have a non-digital sort of presence, as in not relying on technology, but rather actually having interactions without the reliance on electronic communication?
Bring back the fax machine.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think impact on brands. There's a whole sort of swathe of, corporate social responsibility kind of talk, and an idea that companies are basically incentivized to treat their workers well, because otherwise there'll be brand damage. I think that can be overstated because, in the current climate we have, the industrial relations system is so tilted towards capital that you can have legal obligations and brand enhancement that are nevertheless trumped by economic imperatives. So in certain areas, like for instance contract cleaning is one of them, there's just virtually no adherence to labour law. You can't actually successfully win a tender as a private contract cleaning company and adhere to the law, because you simply won't be able to bid low enough. So it's sort of accepted that the law will not be adhered to, and there's no amount of brand damage or picketing or campaigning that will change that. That what will change that is a change in the laws that will allow labour to be able to exercise industrial power against those companies. So I wouldn't hang my hat too much on brand damage. Having said that, There are, workers' capital is immense in this country because of the superannuation system that we have, and that could be used much better to distinguish between companies that do and don't take a proactive approach to adherence to labour law, as can procurement decisions too, in terms of government decisions and who they award contracts to. In terms of system collapse, absolutely, we've already seen it. I mean, I think when algorithms bid in markets, we've already seen these sort of dives in the market that have occurred because it happens so quickly, and the robots are set to bid a certain way when the price reaches a certain point, that there have been these very rapid dives and then recoveries. I think it's very dangerous because you're now at the point where the way the algorithms function are so opaque, not to everyone, but to almost everyone. And it's very antithetical to ideas of democracy. So one of the things I think, desperately needs to happen in terms of rethinking policy for the 21st century is a kind of a sense that automated intelligence needs to be able to reveal its workings and its code to everyday people. You shouldn't need to be a computer scientist in order to understand what's going on. It actually needs to kind of reveal itself to people in a way that's understandable through human language. Because to not do so is to simply sort of permit a whole range of power to be concentrated in ways that are inscrutable, and it shouldn't be acceptable to us. So I think there's a long way to go in developing policy and law to enable technology to be answerable to us, the people. We invented it. It should be answerable to us in certain ways.